Hello, my name's Sasha and I'm here to welcome you to tonight's event. It's the last event of the week, and if you fancy going back and catching up on the events from the week, you should be able to find them on the UEA-CU YouTube or the Facebook, the Real 2021 Facebook page. You can probably tell I'm trying to do this all in one take, just to be a bit more real with you. But otherwise I'll just make about 100 videos, I think. So tonight's event is about community. The title of the talk/event is called Why Real Community is the Best and Scariest Thing You'll Ever Do. So we've got a great talk by Pete that's going to be in a few chunks interwoven with three beautiful creations from three beautiful members of our Christian Union. Ruth's made a lovely acrostic poem with the word community, which is great. Rebecca's very artistic and has made this great animation and lovely talk about home, what that means to her. And Hannah's given us a beautiful worship moment that I hope you'll all enjoy. So yeah, there's a lot to enjoy. Enjoy.
It's not controversial, is it, to say that none of us is perfect? There are lots of memes that make the point. One funny one says, "My wife says I have two faults. I don't listen and something else." Another says, "Some days I amaze myself. Other days I look for my phone whilst I'm talking on it." Do you know what? I'm glad it's not just me. But more seriously, we're all aware of our faults, aren't we? We all want to change certain things about ourselves. It's why we read self-help books and aim to eat cleanly and engage in mindfulness. Around a third of Brits apparently make New Year's resolutions, but our sad track record shows that our old habits that we're trying to leave behind die hard. 2/3 of us abandon any attempt to keep New Year's resolutions by the end of January. Russell Brand's book, Recovery, is a brutally honest take on his own struggles, but he also shows how alike we all are. He emphasises that many of our struggles sprout out of the feeling that we feel disconnected, that there's something missing. He asks, do you ever sense that something is missing? A feeling in your gut that you're not good enough? That if you tick off some action, whether it's eating a Twix or buying some shoes or smoking a joint or getting a good job, you'll feel better? He says, I believe we live in an age of addiction, in which addictive thinking has become almost totally immersive. It's the mode of our culture. Addiction is when natural biological imperatives like the need for food, sex, relaxation or status becomes prioritized to the point of destruction. I mean, his whole book really has the point that in some ways, each of us are addicts. He continues, if you find yourself addicted to bad relationships, bad food, abusive bosses or pornography, it can take a lifetime to spot the problem. But apparently a lifetime is all we have. This book, he writes, isn't just about extremists like me. No, this is a book about you. Part of the point of Russell Brand's book is that we can't find a way out of this kind of addiction on our own. It ties to tonight's theme about community. We need other people. But when we know what we're like, when we admit what we're really like, then letting other people in is what we fear most. I don't know about you, but I even fear other people stumbling across my Spotify playlist sometimes. I fear how they might look down on me if they just knew my guilty listening pleasures. How much more if the community around me didn't just know about my playlists, but my habits, my daydreams, some of the shameful things that I've done in the past. Most of us, I think, find it functionally easier to just hold people at arm's length, to only let them see bits of us. But as long as we do that, we are condemned to never experiencing the deepest intimacy of community, of friendship, of being known and being welcomed. And so long as we hold community away in this way, some of the dark habits that we would love to shed are simply persistent. Now, Russell Brand, I've got to say, is a great read on this, but I think greater hope is found in the person of Jesus. Who'd have thought Jesus having as much to say as Russell Brand? And we'll see what Jesus has to say in just a moment or two. But spoiler alert, Jesus' help and hope for community and for transformation comes in precisely the opposite way that you'd expect.
To sort of acrostic format to explore how I found community with Christians. First of all, collaboration. Rather than going it alone, being part of a community brings opportunities for collaboration and bouncing ideas off each other. Orientation. Together as a community, we look in the same direction. Where we have conflicting priorities, Christian community helps us orientate and reorientate ourselves towards God and putting Him first in our lives. Meaning. Through community, we are able to delve deeper into what following Jesus means and how through Him we have a meaning and have a purpose. Motivation. When things become difficult, by being in community with other Christians, we are able to support each other to keep going and to focus on God and to share Him with others. Understanding. We are able to learn how others experience life and God through working together and standing alongside each other. As we gain a greater understanding of each other, we're also able to support each other much better. Nourishing. Part of community is digging deeper into our relationship with God and discovering more about Him through support from more mature Christians and through each other. Interdependence. Rather than being independent and seeking to do it all on our own, community recognises that we need each other and that we all have different strengths. Together. As community, we unite as seeking to work together and not just working on our own. And finally, diversity, which is both a joy and a challenge. In Christian community, we join with those we may never otherwise encounter with different perspectives and different lives. It's great, but it also brings us out of our comfort zones. And altogether, most of the first letters and the last letter of diversity make community.
Now, across Real Fortnight, we're using Mark's Gospel, the earliest biography of Jesus, to consider some of the questions. And tonight, as we think about community, I want us to consider an episode from early in Jesus' public ministry, described in chapter 2. Jesus finds himself in the border town of Capernaum. When the Romans occupied the nation of Judah, they carved it into 4 areas. They then quite randomly insisted that customs were levied on goods as they were carried across these borders. Tax collectors were employed to collect this money, including in Capernaum. And on one occasion, whilst he's in Capernaum, Jesus meets one of these tax collectors. It's a man called Levi. Now, it's hard for me to encapsulate just how much people hated tax collectors like Levi. They were hated for being in league with the Romans. After all, they made their livelihood collecting unjust taxes for the oppressors. But furthermore, tax collectors were hated because this very job made them very rich. The Romans allowed tax collectors to collect a little bit more than the required amount and then to help themselves to the surplus, and they often did so gleefully. Do you know, one document from the time says that tax collectors should be treated as worse than those with extreme diseases. Keep your distance from them because they'd chosen their sorry lot. Another person at the time suggests deep cleaning your house if a tax collector's been there. So most people would have seen Levi, this man, as a man totally without conscience, beyond the pale, hopeless, irredeemable. He'd probably learned to think of himself in that way as well. Most people would have seen Levi and said, "Levi, I've got 2 words for you." So did Jesus. But Jesus' words were very different. Here's what we read. As he walked along, Jesus saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," Jesus told him. And Levi got up and followed him. Now let that sink in. This is Levi. He's a traitor, a collaborator, a bully. And Jesus is oblivious to none of this because he's meeting Levi at his very tax booth. Yet Jesus goes out of his way to say to Levi, "Follow me." Turns out that Jesus is for the hated and for the hateful, because Levi is the nastiest piece of work you could possibly meet. Yet Jesus wants him. He singles him out. And we see this time and again in the life of Jesus. When nobody else likes someone, when everyone else will hate them or cast them aside, Jesus wants them. Can you possibly begin to imagine what this would have meant to Levi? Just think of it. Outside of the office, Levi would have been isolated and despised. No one would have ever invited him to anything. He was condemned by the hole he dug all by himself. But now Jesus is singling Levi out, coming to him and calling him. Now, Mark, the gospel writer, leaves the details of Levi's backstory tantalizingly silent. I don't think we're to think this is the first time he'd had contact with Jesus. Maybe he'd listened in on Jesus preaching, but to this point, when it came to Jesus, Levi had always clearly counted himself out. Jesus wouldn't want anything to do with me. But now everything changes as Levi hears Jesus' words. "Follow me. I want you, Levi." Tonight we're thinking about true community, but this story illustrates an important principle that community can only begin when we know that we're wanted. All of the time we're not sure whether or not we're wanted. We'll always hedge our bets. We'll always keep part of ourselves hidden. But knowing when we're wanted allows us to face the facts about ourselves and even to admit the things that are wrong in our lives and how things are. But it's from the safety of yet being wanted that our wings can begin to unfurl. We sometimes imagine that real community will occur when people are just willing to look over our faults, to imagine they're not there. That's not Jesus, and in fact that kind of insipid community is powerless. Much more powerful when we realise that Jesus meets us in our faults, in our mess, and yet wants us. We might say, if I can put it like this, that Jesus' acceptance of us is conditional. Conditional acceptance says, "I will accept you if you do this." Unconditional acceptance says, "I will accept you and I don't care what you're like." Contra-conditional acceptance says, "I know exactly what you're like. I don't find it attractive at all, but I want you." And of these, contra-conditional acceptance is by far the most powerful. Do you remember what Russell Brand said? A lot of our problems root from a feeling of disconnection. And now Levi is perceiving that this kind of love, this kind of contra-conditional acceptance and welcome is his. It's worth losing everything for. And so we're told that Levi got up and followed Jesus. He just wants to be with Jesus, despite the upheaval, despite the cost. And with that, Levi's journey of welcome and transformation begins. A story we'll return to in just a few moments.
Home is not a word that I sit comfortably with. I have spent my whole life moving between them, and lockdown has brought yet another in a new country with a new language. So I have learned a short answer to the question, "Where are you from?" But whatever answer I chose never seemed to quite fit, always leaving room for longing and not knowing. So I kept searching for this elusive place, but instead of finding it, I kept accumulating fragments of the notion of home. One piece where I feel loved, one piece I feel safe where my parents are,
one where I know the landscape, one where I speak the language, another where I pay rent. But they were never one and the same, never sure to put down roots in case it was ripped away. So I kept searching, carrying these pieces of home with me, trying to make sense of it all. When my arms were full and tired, and I was still no closer, I surrendered to the idea that I would always be lost. And it is there that I was found. In my exhaustion and confusion, God led me home. Not to one of bricks and cement, but one that is in me and all around me. One that is with God. I may never find a place on this earth to call home, but that's okay, because in my Heavenly Father's house there is a room for me, a place where I do not need to try and fit in, figure out the culture or learn my way around, a home that feels like home from the moment you step through the door. The invitation was always there, the door was always open. It is here in this place that I will grow my roots, in soil that does not belong to a country but to the Creator. Here I will choose to thrive, growing in the ground I am seated in.
So far this evening, we've seen that Jesus wanted this man called Levi. He's welcomed him, he wants him, despite what he's like. It's as if Jesus is willing to publicly align himself with scum. And perhaps unsurprisingly, the moral people of the day are appalled at Jesus' acceptance of Levi. To them, it seems that Jesus is like an anarchist going around and ripping up the rulebook of who's welcomeable. But in the midst of it, Jesus utters a memorable line. Chapter 2, verse 17 of Mark's Gospel, he says this: "It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but those who are ill. I've not come to call the righteous, but sinners." Now, this same teaching is developed elsewhere by Jesus, but the thrust is always the same. It's that Jesus' followers are not made of the apparently well, but those who will recognise that they are sick. I think sometimes we can often imagine that Jesus was on a kind of moral crusade to make the world a better place, and he was on the lookout for like-minded people. But look at how he relates to Levi. The fundamental starting point for being Jesus' follower is not to hold that you're good, but that you're bad. The starting point for being Jesus' follower is not to hold that you're healthy, but to admit that you're sick. Think about it. If it had been any other way, Levi could never have been one of Jesus' followers. Often then, Christianity is portrayed as gathering up the good people and excluding the bad. But can you see that cannot be the case? Being a follower of Jesus can't be about gathering up the good, because according to Jesus, there are no good people. Jesus' starting point is that each of us, along with the whole of humanity, is part of the league of the guilty. Now listen, we're not all guilty of the same things or in the same way or to the same degree. But what Jesus is saying is that each of us is guilty enough that we should be able to recognise the family resemblance in each other, even if we've discovered not just one another's Spotify playlists, but one another's deepest points of shame. In a sense, we'd be able to recognise each other. Indeed, in a sense, we're all mirrors of each other. There's a crack that runs through the middle of us all. But that is the very failure that Jesus came to deal with. He'll go on to die, and at the cross, he pays the penalty of our failure and for the offence that we've caused to God, and takes it all upon his own shoulders. As he dies, he pays it all. You might be able to see then that following Jesus, and indeed going on as a Christian, is inherently humbling. Most religions ask you to point to what you can offer, your religiosity, your sincerity, your actions, your work for charity, your goodness. Jesus says following him is the precise opposite. The only qualification that Jesus demands from you is for you to own your failure and to rest in his mercy. And what does this mean for community? Now, when communities following Jesus are truly grasped by what we've been exploring tonight, I hope you can see that they are the most transparent, invigorating, honest places you can ever hope to be. Because we're able to take the masks off our face and come clean about what we're really like. People who are gripped by Jesus aren't shocked at how this disposition to ruin good things shows itself in the lives of other people, because they know themselves. It means that everyone can be open about their failure without fear. Each person knows that they've done the same as others, and even when they haven't done exactly the same, they see the inner disposition in their own hearts that makes that thing very plausible in their own case too. It's that movement that causes communities then to never abandon anyone as a lost cause. The welcome that we've received in Jesus energizes us to welcome others too. And indeed, that welcome, that community that flows, is enough to bring habit-busting transformation. Even that longed for by Russell Brand and others. Maybe you might like to ask a Christian friend about their own experience of this. There's a beautiful picture of this even in Mark's Gospel. We've said that Levi was a tax collector for the brutal Roman regime, a man beyond the pale. And yet he went on to change his name to Matthew and became one of Jesus' closest followers, even using his education to write one of the four early Gospels. Interestingly, another of Jesus' closest followers is a man named Simon the Zealot. Who were the Zealots? Zealots were political freedom fighters committed to the dramatic overthrow of Rome's influence in Judah. They were committed to doing whatever it took, even turning to violence to secure liberty. And yet both of these men, Levi the traitor and Simon the Zealot, find themselves together amongst Jesus' closest followers. Isn't that crazy? I mean, I imagine that both must have found each other's failure instinctively repulsive. Hearing the ends to which each other had turned must have instinctively reinforced not only a sense of condemnation, but maybe also their own sense of shame. Levi the traitor and Simon the Zealot must have had some awkward conversations. And yet both of them knew that they had been welcomed by Jesus. Both of them knew the reality that Jesus had paid for their deep failure. And so both of them, Levi the traitor, Simon the Zealot, learned to welcome each other in true community. They don't exactly know what this could look like for you. But I do know, and I speak personally, that if you drop the guard, if you will own your failure, if you will bring it to Jesus, and if you will rest in his mercy, he will welcome you as his own, just as he did to Levi and to Simon. I know that experiencing this kind of contra-conditional mercy is amongst one of the most powerful things you could ever hope to know. And it's enough to free you not only to drop the mask around others, but to let others drop the mask around you too.
Take me back to the garden. Lead me back to the moment I heard your voice. Take me back to communion. Lead me back to the moment I saw your face. And it was all so simple. It was easy to love. No space between us. It was easy to trust. 'Cause you are closer, closer than my skin. and you are in the air I'm breathing in. Here's where the dead things come back to living. I feel my heart beating again. It feels so good to know you are my friend. This is the garden. Here in the place I find you close. This is communion. Here in the place I'm fully known. And it was all so simple. You're so easy to love. No space between us. You're so easy to trust. 'Cause you are closer, closer than my skin. And you are in the air I'm breathing in. Here's where the dead things come back to living. I feel my heart beating again. It feels so good to know you are my friend. And this is where I'm meant to be. Me and you and you and me. And I don't have to prove a thing. You've already approved of me. And this is where I'm meant to be. Me and you and you and me. And I don't have to prove a thing. You've already approved of me. 'Cause you are closer, closer than my skin. And you are in the air I'm breathing in. Here's where the dead things come back to living. I feel my heart beating again. It feels so good to know you are my friend. Hello again, I hope you have enjoyed this video. I want to say a big thank you to Pete for talking, and to Ruth, Rebecca and Hannah for your beautiful creative contributions. I really enjoyed them. And yeah, it's been good to reflect on community and how community is so important. And actually, just in the middle of me filming one of these videos, my friend rang me and was just saying that she was thinking of me, and we had a nice chat and catch up, because we've had some sad news as a kind of friendship group, some really sad news to kind of deal with and comprehend. It's been a big shock to all of us, and it's been lovely to all kind of come together and get in touch with some old friends from school and check in on how everyone's doing, and just randomly call each other like Felicity did today, and just check in and see how everyone's doing. And I was telling Felicity about all these lovely people that have been praying for me in this rough kind of season. This week's been tough. And I was saying my grandparents have just messaged me, highlighting a verse for me and saying they're praying for me and hurting with me. And my siblings were all praying for me. And then my dad sent a message just as I was filming that everyone at my home church is praying. And Felicity said that's just so great to know that you have a community, and a community that spreads like around the country, but also just to feel the community even though we're quite alone at uni at the moment. So yeah, it's very special. It's a special feeling to be part of something like that. And yeah, I encourage you to get in touch, join the CU, and like come along to more events, and reach out to people if you fancy a chat. So yeah, if you do fancy a chat, message on the Christian Union Instagram, Facebook. I think there's some like a Google Docs, Google form to fill out or something. But yeah, it's been lovely to host a virtual host, and yeah, sad that we can't all be together and I can't see your faces, but I hope you're all well and sending lots of love. One more thing, the next event for our events fortnight is on Monday the 8th, and we're going to be talking quite relevantly, as just what I've just talked about support in tough times when we're struggling, so it would be good to see you there.